Okay.
Hey, Daniel.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. There's a few people I've met in my life that I really consider master therapists. They like really seem to know the terrain. And you're definitely one of them that I have.
Oh,
Not that you're perfect. I don't want to say that, but you seem
well,
to.
thank you for that.
But like close enough.
Uh, I'm withdrawing my thanks.
Yeah, but I mean, you're someone that, and seems to spend a long time learning how to be in the therapeutic space with
Mm.
others and using
Mm-hmm.
that space to support healing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
wondering for you, kind of what first drew you into that space, like when you first got called to be a therapist? Because I know
Uh-huh.
you were initially studying physics, right? Or
Right, that's right. It's good memory. Good memory. Yes. Yeah, it was really, I remember there was when I was living in California, this is probably, early 1970s, there was like a show on the public radio station, and it was some fellow, and they called it the Wounded Healer.
Hmm.
And probably that's a term that maybe you know or don't know, is a term that was around there, but really captured me. It was essentially, the theme is that so many people will go into some sort of healing space or work, come from their own wounds,
Mm-hmm.
and that leads them into that terrain. And that essentially was very true for me. I resonated with that because it rang like, yes, I got into working as a therapist, not necessarily because that was my first interest. My first interest in actually talent was in mathematics and physics, and that my idea of myself was that I was going to teach mathematics, teach physics, or something in that realm, because I love teaching. Uh, but that was the realm I was really good in. But because of my own emotional state, because of really feeling cut off from people, cut off from myself, really, really in pain,
Oh.
I fortuitously, it seems in retrospect,
Mm-hmm.
you know, became involved with working with kids with emotional problems, that was called
Oh.
at that time.
Yeah, you went
And
right to the source in a
I
way.
went right to the source. That's a nice way of saying it. I went right to the source. And as I went to that source and found that I could do that, I started in your language, in this language, coming to my own source.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And realizing that that was the work I wanted to do, which was so apart from anything. And this was when I was just, a freshman in college, just, where I was in between freshman and sophomore year, and getting a summer job, and literally falling into something that I didn't know really existed, and finding something that existed for me.
What
And
kind of
that's
context were you working with kiddos in at that
I
point?
I was on the East Coast. I grew up in Brooklyn and New York, and there would be these, East Coast, a lot of summer camps that would be up
Oh
in
yeah.
upstate New York, or in this one was in rural Pennsylvania. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a camp for kids with emotional disturbances, whatever, a wide range. And I needed a job, and I got a job as a counselor,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there I was working with these kids, never done that before. And it touched me. And, you
Yeah, I'm
know,
curious as you talk, just
yeah,
my idea of someone that's drawn to mathematics and
yes.
physics, and then
Hmm.
being thrown into like a camp setting, working with kids in emotional distress. Like,
Yeah.
did you
Uh-huh.
feel you like touched into almost a different part of yourself that like you hadn't had as much contact with, kind of?
Yeah, yeah. I think you could say that. I don't know if I was so cognizant of that.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was doing this, and I felt this connection.
Hmm.
And I felt suddenly that I was tapping into something that had more meaning for me.
Oh yeah. Like there was a basic sort of truth there for you that you were connecting to.
Yes. And I was contributing in a way.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, maybe in as I'm speaking right now, it kind of dovetailed with me as a teacher, me as, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in that way. But, and I was connecting in a way emotionally. And then that's totally switched. I dropped out of one school and went to another school to study psychology and made my parents very unhappy
Yeah, I was
with
wondering about that part. Yeah.
yes, they were not too pleased by my choice, and you know, just totally changed my path.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of that, I began to realize that, you know, that me as helping children, I needed help myself,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and that led me into a whole path of intensive therapy and all those things that, you know, that set me on this course of being a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, psychologist. Yeah.
What were some of the things in the early days that you were connecting to that were sort of facilitating your growth and healing?
Mm. Things meaning,
The different moment. I mean, it was a different time then, right? In the
oh, yeah,
70s.
it was it
What was
was
being offered and
right. Well, you know, I mean, in the things that I was attracted to then still feel so true to me now.
yeah.
Really true. But what was attracted to me then, what I was attracted to, there were three schools then,
Mm-hmm.
real major schools of therapy. There was behaviorism, there was humanistic psychology, transpersonal psychology,
Oh, that
and
was
there was,
emerging when you were
that
in
was
school.
emerging,
Oh,
yes.
cool.
And then there was psychodynamic,
Mm-hmm.
psychoanalytic. Those were the three pillars,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And and I found, you know, very much in terms of working with kids, you know, that it was the humanistic stance that really spoke to me. But at the same time, I found a lot of value in the psychoanalytic stance.
Mm-hmm.
And well, throughout my understanding career, I've always walked in those two paths and tried to bring them together because I don't really feel they're all that separate in many ways. And increasingly, as psychoanalysis has developed, it's just merged. In fact, so many schools of therapy has merged over time. But I was very much then drawn to Gestalt therapy, which, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's how we met,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah,
through
I'm in
Gestalt
Gestalt
therapy.
therapy
Yeah,
training and
right. Through
yeah.
Gestalt therapy, you know, non-directive humanistic therapy, you
Mm-hmm.
know, existential therapy. And,
Yeah.
but simultaneously, because of Gestalt therapy, I was interested in working with the somatic aspects of that. And that led me to some of Reich's psychoanalytic works, which kind of
And
dovetailed,
yeah. And
you
before we
know,
jump into Reich
yeah.
too much, can you name like when you say somatically oriented, like what that means for you or what that
Yeah.
meant then?
Well, Gestalt therapy in those days focused a lot on somatic processes like awareness,
Mm-hmm.
like tuning into one's body, one's behavior, how you were holding yourself, how you were breathing, how you were talking, how you were making contact, not just in your ideas, but as a physical presence with the
Mm-hmm.
other. And in being an experiential therapy, it had you do all these different kind of experiments that they call, or you know, little awareness kind of things, which really addressed the somatic aspects. Like, what do you put your awareness on? Close your eyes and listen and see what you're listening to. And then you open up your eyes and what comes into your awareness. Do you pay attention to what you're eating or how you're tasting things? All those things around awareness that pretty much put the organismic, the body, the somatic as as central,
Yeah. And
you
it
know,
sounds in there too that the senses being a real
the
doorway
senses, right,
into that somatic
right.
experiencing.
Exactly. And that the emotions were totally tied in and connected to that. There wasn't really a split between those somatic sensory processes, muscular movement processes, and the emotions. the emotions were all part of that. And it
Mm-hmm.
had an organismic kind of understanding, since
Yeah.
that we're organisms. So I was very attracted to that, and probably in retrospect, because of my scientific
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is interesting, right? Because I come from a different generation than you,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
like studied Gestalt, and then now studying Reichian work with
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
Like the organismic language is so difficult for me
Ah.
because it feels
Uh-huh.
so like mechanistic and sort of
Uh-huh.
it has a it sounds old to me when I listen to it.
Yeah, because it is so old.
And it was like cutting edge in the 50s, right?
It was totally cutting edge. It was totally cutting edge. And now I feel older as I'm speaking to
I'm sorry.
you. But yes, it was cutting edge, and the language is old,
Yeah.
but it was capturing something that, that really rang true to me. And it captured something that really rang true to me in working with children.
Yeah, what do you see there with children with that
Because
organismic
because
language?
because children are not relating through their heads, so to speak,
Mm.
or just through language.
Mm-hmm.
They're relating through their emotions, through the behavior, through movement. You have to engage them
Mm.
in this, depending upon their age, in a much more free flow of feeling, affect, thought, behavior,
Yeah.
and you know, and with children, you're not just sitting in a chair and just, kind of
Tell me what happened last week, please.
exactly, exactly. Children don't engage in that way,
Yeah.
but and the way I was with children and still are with children is that, they bring out something in me and I bring out something in them. There's kind of a meeting. So the sense of energy and life force and organism were all there
Yeah.
in working with children. And that's, I think, why I resonated with these approaches.
And in that, right, just what you're saying there, the senses, the organism, the
Mhm.
energy,
Yeah,
so ties into Reich, who
right.
became a pillar for you in ways of
It
your,
did. He did.
yeah.
Yes.
Could you dive into Reich a little
Okay.
bit and when you
Well, I will, because Reich is a whole story in itself,
Yeah.
which I'll tell a little bit of the story.
Yeah,
But
please.
essentially, for me, I fell into Reich.
Mm-hmm.
And just like I think I fell in, as I'm saying, I fell into working in psychology and working with children. I became very attracted at this time. So this is 1970, 71, with primal therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
don't,
sort of the screen game
it
and
was the
stuff.
Scream. Yes. There was a
Yeah.
book called The Primal Scream.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so attracted to that. And because the message I took from the Primal Scream was this, you know, we are repressing very deep emotions,
Mm-hmm.
very deep expressions of life. And unless we unlock them, not just through our minds, we talk about them, but unless we deeply go into experiencing them and bringing them forth, we will forever be trapped.
What do
Okay.
we, and trap? Can you stay with that?
Trapped. We remain apart from our true self. We
Mm-hmm.
will be contained. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was further and more radical than Gestalt therapy, which touched the emotions. But here it was literally the idea that you had to literally feel it and embody it and writhe with it and bring the pain, the fear,
Mm.
the joy, whatever, out into the world and out from yourself.
Yeah, like
And
through your organism,
yes, that's right.
those energies express themselves into the
Exactly.
world.
Right. And so therefore the primal scream, the literal scream,
Yes.
not just an internal, I hear a scream,
Mm-hmm.
but I literally scream.
And I've never primal screamed. I always knew of it as a sort of popular thing when a lot of the other modalities like Gestalt
Yes.
and things were emerging, and it
Yes.
seems to have faded a bit.
Oh, it's yes.
This
I think
idea that
it's
like
yes.
catharsis doesn't bring about long-standing
Exactly.
change.
Exactly.
But I'm
Exactly.
curious for you, like when you did it, right? When you were in the scream, was there like a bit of play at first? Like you had to kind of play yourself into the scream and then at some point it becomes real? Like what was it like actually kind of engaging in the scream when you were doing it?
Yeah. Well, what it was is as I got into it, after I finished college, I left for California to be primal screaming.
Oh,
You know,
you like fall.
I, you know,
You like friends were following the dead, and you followed
that's
the
right.
scream.
I followed the scream. That's right. I followed the scream, and the approach that I was using, I couldn't afford the real troops primal scream Janov, Arthur Janov, who was who originated that and was
Mm-hmm.
doing it in, I think, Beverly Hills, California, or something like that. So I couldn't afford that, but there was some offshoots of
So
that,
you got some
like
like secondhand scream.
secondhand scream. Got it. Secondhand scream. And what I did was that it would be like therapy, but we would all be in a group together and
Mm-hmm.
we'd be working with one another. So it'd be like self-help kind of doing. And people would be laying down and talking and using imagery and stuff like that, all in the same room. So we'd be listening to one another and hearing one another, but in one's own process. And that became synergistic to
Mm-hmm.
one another. And one thing would trigger another, and then suddenly there would be stronger emotions, and then you'd be encouraged to
Oh.
move with the emotion, to let the emotion come forth. If there was something you wanted to do physically, to hit or to writhe or whatever it is, to let
Mm.
your voice out or whatever, and in the process of doing that, for me, what happened is that memories and insights would occur, because when now you activate emotions, you activate the whole complex that have to do with the emotions, the thoughts and the behaviors and all of
Yeah.
that go along with it.
Kind of held
So
in the body keeps the score, which is such
yes,
a popular
exactly. Yeah,
phrase now.
exactly. The
Yeah.
body keeps the score because the body, but that the whole kind of connection between emotion and feeling and body and somatic process.
Mm-hmm.
Once you open up one aspect of that can, it starts to come out.
Yeah. In Buddhism, we have this idea, the Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra, and the
Ah,
whole thing is like none of these things are separate.
exactly.
Like there's a phrase: no eye, no ear, no tongue, no body, no mind, because they're all
Right.
like one experience, but we
That's
like to
right.
look at it sort of through different lenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That fits so well.
Yeah.
And when you're experiencing it, when you're deeply in the experience, part of being deeply in the experience is not to have them distinct from one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. They kind of become one.
They become one because you're one with it. You're one with that emotion, with that feeling state, with that energy.
I
So,
appreciate you
yeah.
describing the primal scream, because I had such a cliche version of it in my mind,
Yes.
like people sitting around a circle and they're just screaming together. But
No,
it sounds much more
no.
nuanced as you talk about
It
it.
really was, and it was an entree. But what
Mm.
I noticed in the entree of it, and I went through a number. I went Primal Scream, and then I came back, and then I went through another institute that had the Primal Scream stuff. But somehow in there, with one of my therapists later on, was into Reich's work, and that's how I began to study more of Reich's work. And in reading Reich's work, I felt he understood the process of how emotion needs to be addressed and and brought forth in a way where the primal scream seemed to be a little too global.
Mm.
It didn't seem to be as systematic. It wasn't as systematic as I began to understand through Reich's work, as well as Reich talked about energy, life energy, which Primal Janov didn't really speak about. And he also spoke about, very eloquently, the effect of society on deadening the life process. And all of those things really resonated with me. And so I fell into Reich's work through the primal scream.
Yeah. When
And
you say that, I hear the kind of how that would resonate based on what you were talking about earlier, of kind
mhm.
of feeling cut off, or like I don't know the language used
Yes,
earlier, but like
yes,
that sort of dead
yes,
inside is what I
right,
heard.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then
Yes,
with Reich, it sounds like there was more precision in the
there's more precision.
process of activating or working towards those emotions.
Right, and yes, in the process of actually doing therapy, I felt
Mm-hmm.
that Reich, because Reich seemed to, in my mind, understand the real sense between how we mold ourselves in a way to defend ourselves against negative feelings inside, but also to accommodate the society as we take in the society, both
Mm.
ideationally and somatically, into what he called the character or the armor. And I like those concepts. They seem to be true. They seem to fit with my working with children
Mm.
and
It
my understanding.
resonated towards what you were seeing in the real
Exactly.
world. Yeah.
Exactly. And it resonated with my interest in psychoanalysis and all those things together. That moved me into Reich's work. And that was probably in 1972 or something like that. And I continued with it. I
Yeah.
continued.
How long have you been with Reich now, sort of as a main
Well, if,
figure
if
for
it
you?
was 72, what does that make
Oh
it?
yeah, I could do math. You're the
Yeah.
math guy. Can
Oh,
you?
right. That's right. But I forgot about. Oh, yeah. So that makes it what, 50, 49 years?
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
So 49 years you've kind of been, and you're not like a purist, right? Where you're just only Reich. It sounds like
No, no.
in working with you over the years, you've stayed up to date on the current sort of
Yeah,
milieu.
but maybe that makes us a purist. It makes me a purist because Reich was not a purist.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Reich himself was continually adapting and integrating and attempting to broaden his conceptual field and understanding of what he was encountering. So the whole idea of becoming a purist or fundamentalist in any particular way would be anti-fundamental Reich.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Kind of
right.
a twist on that.
If Reich were here, he might call you out if you did that.
Exactly. If Reich were here, he might do that. If he was
Yeah.
still interested at all in any of the things he.
If he would be creating weather storms still and
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe. Yeah.
yeah. There was something you said just a moment ago that really I was drawn to, and kind of it sounded like your naming of like character armor
Yeah.
and the way that like emotions get activated or
Hmm.
arise and the way
Yeah.
that the armor blocks it and that
Yeah.
relationship to society.
Yeah.
could could you hang out there a bit more and
Sure.
kind of expand on that, because that seems like
Sure.
such a central principle to Reich and
Right.
our
Hmm.
suffering in the world, like
It
that we.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, Reich, just in a historical context, Reich was a student of Freud, and this was in the early 1910
Hmm.
1920s 1920s, uh late 20s. Actually, it was right after the war, actually World War I, where he started becoming a student and a medical student, and then started taking up learning psychoanalysis. Anyway, he introduced early on in trying to understand, well, how does therapy work or not work, or how do we actually engage in repression. He
Mm-hmm.
saw that repression was not just ideational in terms of a thinking mechanism, but he noticed that we repress our feelings, or we defend ourselves in a whole organismic way, through our musculature, through the way we breathe, through the way we walk, through what he called our character attitudes, our character ways in which we embody ourselves in the world. And that's the way we begin to know ourselves. So the biological organism, this is how we would talk about it later, forms in a certain way so as to accommodate itself to what the environment is allowing or not allowing, to keep itself safe.
And when you say environment, they're often like the family,
The
the
family
culture,
environment, the culture,
school,
exactly,
like all the
exactly.
places we sort of inhabit and have to
Exactly,
fit
exactly,
into.
exactly. Though for Reich, as was for psychoanalysis, and as we speak about now in contemporary psychology understanding, those early years, that environment when we're quite young, which then becomes the environment of the family, has the most profound effects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because we're still growing, because we're so malleable, because we're just organizing ourselves as 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 beings in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so Reich would say that if the attitude in the family was be a man, so to speak, whatever that
Yeah.
particular man, suddenly you have to be a man. If the man means not cry, if it means stand up straight, it means don't
Don't
show
be weak.
softness, don't be weak. Okay,
Yeah.
what we do is then organismically we form ourselves in a way that we're not weak. So we rigidify in our spine maybe, or
Mm,
stick out our chest so we can't really fully exhale, or rigidify our eyes, or rigid our 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 jaw, do different kind of maneuvers in our body which essentially prevent us from being weak.
yeah. And like when you're saying there, right, that energy moves through us,
Yeah.
and whether that's even sadness or these like
Yes,
emotions that
exactly.
we connect to weakness,
That's right.
we have to do something to them to contain them so they
That's
don't get
right.
expressed.
Yes, we have to stop it.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to stop it. And that stopping it is manifest again in the biology and in our behavior, what Wright called the character, in our
Mm-hmm.
musculature. And he noticed that in therapy with people, they had to address that in
Mm,
therapy, those defenses, in order for a person to really begin to feel those emotions
mm,
and then go to the underlying issues that the person was defending against. Reich introduced, as I understand it, the road to insight is through the emotions.
mm-hmm.
It's not through observing the emotions. It's not through going, as we talk now, more top down, as the
Yeah.
language
Like
now,
cerebrally
cerebrally.
like
Yes,
addressing our emotions, talking about them
that's
instead of
right. The
picking them apart.
analyzing. That
Yeah.
was the psychoanalysis. It was, you can get to that. How you really have to get to it was by opening up the feeling states.
And the doorway to the feeling state for Reich was through this body armoring or the character process.
Right, right. The body armoring and the behavioral armoring and the
Mm,
thinking armoring,
yeah.
all having to do with the total character. So
Yeah.
Reich would start pointing those things out,
Yeah.
with
Which is uncomfortable
which was uncomfortable.
when you're in that
Yes,
position. I have
that's
to.
right. It was uncomfortable, and people would become uncomfortable. And as they became uncomfortable, and those they would be moved off of their usual point of comfort.
Oh yeah, they had. Yeah, this is great.
And as they were moved off of their usual point of contact, some of their emotions and behaviors would start to break through.
Mm-hmm.
And, Reich would work with that so that there would be a freedom. And then there would be what you would term catharsis,
Yeah.
essentially that the repressed emotions would come through. And with that would be the insights. But also with that would be a reorganization of the way the person was in the world.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have to be, I don't have to be, I can be a strong man without being a rigid man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in order to really be that, I've got to change the biophysical. I've got to change the physicality in me so I can actually soften.
Yeah.
But if I actually soften, then I'm actually going to feel these feelings. And then I'm going to have to deal with the conflicts that I have about, oh, I'm not supposed to feel these feelings.
Yeah.
And so it's all wrapped together. And Reich articulated that very beautifully to me. And that's what attracted me. It was
Yeah.
a far more sophisticated understanding of that process than Primal Scream, which seemed to me far more global. And yet they were talking about something very similar. The deep emotional expressions were being repressed, inhibited, based upon what the interface between the person and the environment.
When I hear you say emotions here, I kind of hear it in two ways. I
Mm.
hear it as like the maybe the past emotions that have been repressed and are
Yeah.
sort of still stuck or locked in the
Yeah.
body that we have to find our way to and need to
Mm-hmm.
be released or could be
Mm-hmm.
released.
Yes.
But also that like emotions arise in the moment in certain
Yeah.
contexts. Like you were talking about the man who works on this idea of weakness and starts to let softness through, that
Yes.
when softness arises to like make room for it, let it come
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
Like that's all I got.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. The way I've come to think about it is, I don't know if really past emotions are locked in the body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think what happens is that there are just some processes in terms of how we can contact and feel and express emotions that, you know, that, that become armor, that aren't really working. And once you begin to change that, then how you think, when you think about what happened in the past, you
Mhm.
are able then to relate to it from a more emotional stance because you have access to that.
Yeah, that's a pretty nuanced view that you open up the, this is just what I'm hearing, you
Yeah.
open up the character arming, whether that's through the
Yeah.
behavior or the body. And as that opens and you experience these emotions, maybe for the first time in a while or in a more
Mm-hmm.
pure way,
Yeah.
if there is pure,
Right.
like that the you remember and you connect to these past experiences because these emotions can flow through.
Right. That's right. And you connect it to him through your now emotions. But all of that connecting is in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're not in the past. We're in the present. So you're connecting to memory from where you are now in your changed biophysical state or characterological state to those situations from the past, but now you're connecting to it. And so you can remember things. This is the way I see it, where you remember certain things, but now you remember, wow, now I remember being angry, or as I remember it, I feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I couldn't feel angry.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's all in the present. And
Yeah.
it's all reorganizing how we are as we function now. The past lives in the present. The present moves toward the future. And it's all here. What, be here now? Kind
Yeah.
of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Ram Dass has been on my
Ram
mind.
Dass, they might as well date me on that one.
Oh no, I'm really into Ram Dass
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
He's
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah.
had a resurgence after he
Oh,
died.
he has. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At least for
Okay.
me.
Okay. Well, that's an N of one. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you say that though, a part of me like, thinks back to my own moments of
Mm-hmm.
like, some part of the body opening up, whether it's like the
Yeah.
gut or somewhere
Yeah.
where I have
Yeah.
harder time inhabiting.
Yes.
And it seems the moment that it opens, the memories are there, like pretty,
Yes.
like it's almost instantaneous. Like,
Yes.
oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, like as this opens, I'm also three again, like
Exactly.
in my crib, feeling
Exactly.
alone and wondering where someone is.
Mm-hmm.
And it,
Yes.
it gets really kind of soupy and messy in a
Yes,
moment.
exactly. Well, exactly. So that would lead you and correctly to kind of say, well, the emotions are locked in there.
Yeah.
But maybe too, it's like you have these memory states,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and once you connect with that emotional state, it connects you to the past where those feelings were,
Yeah.
to those memories. It is very frequent in therapy that as people begin to feel these more alive states, whether it's in the heart, whether it's in the
Mm-hmm.
pelvis, whether it's in the belly, whether it's in the eyes, very often they go back into a far earlier time when it was before it was stopped.
Yeah. My mind's drifting in a way I like
Yeah.
right now, but I don't
Yeah.
know if it's gonna make much sense. But
Okay.
like, one thing I'm hearing as you talk is like, so we open up these emotions and these charged or
Yeah.
more beautiful in way emotions,
Yes.
and that when we open them, we go back, as you said, to this point where they're stuck, and
Yeah.
it's almost like we have to clean them out, like clean them
Yeah.
out of the residue that stuck them, like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so
We
that
have,
maybe loneliness is no longer being three in a crib. Like I can
yeah.
feel loneliness in a new way as an adult. And it
Yes.
might lose some of its charge of fear around it because it's no
Yes.
longer like as life threatening as it was.
Yeah. That's well said. Well, because one, we're not in the crib anymore.
Yeah. Or
You
what,
know?
or if it's anger in some way that
Yeah.
like all these ways that we can kind
Yes.
of
Yes.
refresh emotions to mean what
Right.
they are now.
Right. And if it's done in the therapeutic context, you're not alone because you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Though you might feel alone.
Yeah.
One might feel alone. But it's now with another.
Hmm.
And so much of therapy is all about the being with another.
Yeah. Yeah,
you
that
know.
these feelings that may have happened when we're alone, or
Yeah.
even creating aloneness through breaking off from others,
Yes.
that when they open up, there's another there
Right.
to
Right.
receive and be with
Yeah.
you
Or
as you connect
right.
to
Right. Or there's another there that you really can't bring it toward,
oh
that you don't believe can receive it. You
yeah, yeah.
know,
I have no
that's
idea what you're talking
no,
about
you
there.
don't. No, no, because that's, when Freud would speak of the idea of transference, essentially what he's saying is that we have these emotional schemes,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, understanding storylines, whatever, based upon our experience that we transplant into the present,
Mm.
and we will transplant that. So, in therapy, as a person possibly begins to feel this aloneness, and then I might say, and how is it for you for me to be here? The person might feel, you know, I can't really show it to you,
Yeah,
or I still feel alone. Even in your presence, I feel alone. And
yeah,
why would that person feel? Because they're not used to having that, not being alone.
yeah.
And
Even
so,
as you talk, right?
yes,
Like, oh,
right.
like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm alone. I want to reach out. Like
that's
they
right.
seem so, but like I'll be alone, but that's reaching out to you. That doesn't
Right.
feel safe.
That doesn't feel safe.
So I'm gonna still stay in this aloneness, disconnected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you work, part of therapy is working to help the person undo that so that they can feel safe and that you can connect. So therapy is totally an interpersonal process. And I think
Mhm.
that's what I liked about Reich too. Reich, primal therapy seemed to be leaving the person alone more in terms of their imagery,
Mm.
going through primals. But
Yeah.
Reich saw, and what I took from Reich is that, no, it's totally in the present, it's in the here and now, and it's between you and I.
Mm.
It's with the other. And the character and the defenses are defenses against contact between you and the world, between you and another person, primarily. And so that's what happens. That's what happens in therapy. And just those, and that's why it spoke to me, because that's what happens when you work with children.
Mm.
When you're with children, it's
Oh yeah.
totally interpersonal,
Yeah.
right?
It's right now.
It's right now, and
Even
you
the fantasy
engage.
is right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. It is, and you're engaging right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's the richness of therapy, whether you're working with children, young children, or adolescents, or any age, is really to bring that. It's going to have a different form with
Mm-hmm.
different age, but to bring that element of connectedness in sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you talk, right, like one thing I'm drawn to is like
Mm.
this notion, and change the languaging to fit for you, but of the functionality of
Mhm.
emotions, the
Yeah.
purpose, the
Yes.
because
That's
like oh they're part of contact or moving through
yeah.
space, and we cut
Hmm.
them off. We're cutting off this energy or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wants to engage or have something change, or these are just words that are coming. Can you speak to
But
yourself what you see the value of these emotions are? Like,
yeah.
why do we go through this work of reclaiming them or working through
Right.
the armor? Like, what's the
Okay.
point?
That's great questions. And functionality is so important, because Reich spoke about functionality. He called it orgonomic functionalism.
Mm,
Orgonomic meaning orgone, life energy.
mm,
Orgonomic functionalism, seeing the functional, how things function from an energetic perspective. But as Reich spoke about, and as Pearls and Gestalt therapy early on in development of Gestalt therapy spoke about, and as current emotion theory speaks about, and as current attachment theory speaks about across the board, is that all of our emotions serve a particular function, that they're built in as ways in which we engage the world.
mm,
It moves us toward the world, it moves us to make contact, and each emotion moves us in a certain way, either protect ourselves or learn or grow. And we oscillate between different emotions, depending upon the environmental context and about what we, and what we bring. And without emotions, we would not learn, grow, or engage. Without curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
we would not approach anything. Without pleasure, we would not relax into anything. Without anger, we would not defend ourselves. Without fear, we wouldn't stop and take note, or keep ourselves from difficult situations or frightening situations. Without shame, we would not then kind of control and keep ourselves maybe more within in a societal context. I mean, every emotion without disgust, we would just take in those things that aren't good for us. Every emotion in a basic emotion, these are the basic emotion,
Mm-hmm.
has a particular function. And when we've repressed and don't allow those, we've cut a certain aspect of what we need to be as fully functional human beings we've cut it from our ability to access that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can't cry, if we can't feel sadness, we've cut our hearts off from
Hmm.
being able to be empathy and engage and feel the other person's pain. If we can't feel disgust, and a lot of people say, wow, you shouldn't ever be disgusted, but if we can't feel disgust, we can't really tune into what really doesn't work, what really seems to be something that we really don't want to go near, that is really harmful to us, and maybe not us, but to others in the world.
Like if
You
we're
know,
in a job that we don't like how do we know that we don't like the job?
exactly,
How do we tune in and be
exactly.
like, well, it's this and that and this
That's right.
quality and this aspect, or I just
Exactly.
hate that person.
Exactly. Sure. And if we can't feel curiosity, we're not going to want to learn.
Mm.
Things are going to feel very, very boredom. So as we've armored against each of these emotions or each of these emotions in certain contexts, we've lost our degrees of freedom and we've lost the full capacity to, as humans, engage fully in the world.
Yeah.
And as you connect with the emotions, the pro however the process is, what you're wanting to do is get all of you back online.
Mm.
So if
Mm-hmm.
each emotion is like a different note on a musical scale, you take all of the emotion, or you truncated C as a
Yeah,
chord.
like C is not allowed in this
If
song
not
anymore.
allowed, it's going to really change, the
Yeah.
whole palette. Or, if you're painting and you take away one color, that's essentially what happens with emotions. So emotions move us, they inform us, they move us in the world, and we need to have access to them all.
And when you say that, right, there's this real value of emotions. This sort
Yes.
of they are essential in the making of our lives and the
Yes.
engaging with the world and
Mm-hmm.
meaning and all these
Yes.
parts. But like what I've seen in myself and what I see when I work with folks myself is
Mm-hmm.
when someone does like make contact, maybe for the first time in a while, with
Yes.
one of these emotions that have been cut off.
Yes.
And like all of them can be cut off for different reasons, it
Right.
seems.
And in different contexts.
Yeah, there's like
Yes.
whole variety of ways.
Yes.
But when they touch it,
Yeah.
it seems not always, but a lot of times there's something very threatening about it.
Yes.
And there also seems to be some awareness, and this is a bit of meaning I add to
Mm-hmm.
it, that like, oh, I'm now in touch with like a 3-year-old anger or a
Yeah.
5-year-old anger. And it's not matching my other emotions now that have had 20 years to like grow and
Yeah.
evolve and like
Yes. Mm-hmm.
fit into my life. And it feels like threatening. Like, is this going to overpower me? Because that's a lot of rage I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling.
Yeah.
Can
Right.
you like speak to like from the subjective point of view that these emotions, when we first contact them again, that they are scary or they don't feel safe or like they're volatile in a way, like we don't know what to do with them
Yeah,
almost?
well, in a sense, there's two aspects to it. One, the reason we've repressed them is because they've been associated with threat.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We
So
went to
there's like a linkage that's
there's a
happening.
linkage. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been told your anger is frightening. Your anger is going to upset your parents. Your anger is going to drive you crazy. Your anger is going to do X, Y, and Z. So there's a linkage between fear, threat, shame, maybe, and this particular emotion. So once you access that, you access the reason why you stopped it in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
why you truncated, how, and why you armored against it.
Yeah.
So for all of those emotions, each emotion is yes, suddenly, oh no, I'm afraid of it, or I shouldn't have it, or I'm ashamed of it, or whatever. Well, it activates those contractive associative emotions that have been part of the reason that we stop it. And we also go back to when we felt it when it was more pure.
Mm.
You know, when you talked about the more adult
Oh, you
emotions,
those are like diluted in a way as you think
yeah, they
about them.
are. They've been massaged and diluted, and so,
Yeah.
you know, one of one of a song that I really loved, that really spoke to me, and spoke to me, I think, because of what I felt in my own character, but also what I was reaching for, is in Peter Pan. There's that thing, I won't grow up.
Mm.
I don't want to be an adult or whatever, because essentially the theme was, as you become an adult, you become duller.
Mm.
You truncate your emotions. You no longer can play. You no longer can feel lively. So I want to remain a child.
Mm.
But my sense is that if we allow the child and free the child, we can be now as spontaneous in our own particular ways as a child.
Mm.
The kind of emotions we have that we connect with as, oh, this is my child emotions, then become integrated in, these are my emotions now.
You think there's a way to maintain or reconnect with the purity that sort of
Yes,
gets diluted through
yes, yes.
this process of becoming civilized or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
exactly. Yeah, Freud felt there was civilization and its disconnects, discontents. We have to become civilized,
Yeah, he
which is a
saw
taming.
these emotionality as a hindrance to society in
Right.
a way.
And Reich saw it not at all. He
Yeah.
saw those were the expressions of the core true self.
Mm.
And those could be continued throughout one's life.
But in a way that's not saying to be like 5-year-olds again. Like there's some balance
Well,
there.
well, 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 in what way? What way do you mean, like 5-year-olds?
Impulsive and they're pretty, they can be very only able to see their own point of view
Yeah,
and like
yeah, because their emotions then are expressed and felt within where they are in their maturational process.
yeah, thank you. That's this piece that kind of as we mature, our relationship to these pure emotions might change and like how
Yes,
they're expressed, but they can still be
yes,
as
exactly.
strong or pure, but it's filtered through a different sort of development of the person almost or
Yes,
something.
because we're organized. We're not, the 5-year-old, like you say, is egocentric. You didn't use
Thank
that
you.
word,
Yeah, I was looking for it.
but
Thank
you
you
were
for
looking
grabbing.
for, okay, and they're egocentric not because they're, egoic or whatever, but they're egocentric because yet their cognitive abilities in some realms have not caught up
Mm-hmm.
with that. And, so they see things through a certain way. But as you get mature, your mental processes, your ability to regulate and self-regulate goes along just the way you become taller and stronger, and can do flips in the air, which you couldn't do at age 5, or age 3. All
Mm-hmm.
those things develop. And as you develop, those same emotions are there. They just, as you said very well, they express themselves or in a different way because you as an organism have changed.
Mm. Yeah, I always guess I hold a bit of a different view, and
Mm.
partially it comes from Ken Wilber and integral
Uh-huh.
theory. It's just something that influenced me when I was younger
Yes.
around that our emotions also go through stages of development.
Yes.
That
Uh-huh.
like all the emotions themselves develop too. But for
Mm-hmm.
you, it sounds like it's saying more that the person develops and the emotions get it
Well, they become
filtered
more,
through.
yes, and they become more complex.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean that's for some that's development, right? Like
yeah,
complexity.
right. They become more complex, and they're experienced differently
Yeah.
because we're not the same age. And yet again, when a client in my, oftentimes as they feel like, oh, suddenly I feel this, I suddenly see more, I feel brighter, I feel this
Mm.
energy, I feel this lightness in my eyes. Oh, this is the way I was looking up into the sky when I was 8 years old. you know
Yeah.
so in a sense, in that moment, it doesn't feel like it's a different emotion.
Yeah.
It feels like, hey, I've retrieved something from the past. In other words, I remember, but it's here right now.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that emotion hasn't matured or changed.
Yeah. And when you say that, the like qualities of aliveness
Yes.
and immediacy and
Hmm.
presence seem to be tied into this reconnecting or
Yes, that's right.
reclaiming. I don't know the right word to say what
Yeah,
we do when
right.
we kind of,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
right. However you want to say it, reconnecting, reclaiming, making
yeah,
contact with, bringing
yeah.
forth.
So there's like an ability that emerges when we do this work that you're describing of working on our
Hmm.
armor and
Yeah.
making available the total range of
Hmm.
emotional human experience, that
Yes. Hmm.
aliveness and
Hmm.
a more visceral engagement in the moment
Hmm.
becomes more like
Yeah.
naturally available, not that you have to manufacture it through meditating or doing different things to get there.
Right, exactly. That's right. That's right. You don't have to manufacture. I mean, meditating to me is a way that you train the organism to be able to remember and access it,
Yeah,
but then once it becomes part of how the organism functions right now, it's just there.
yeah, yeah,
Nothing more has to be done because it's now there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like, you talked about it earlier, this sort of quality that we are an organism. And I think that's
Yes.
a view that maybe some people, like, they might think, oh, we're an animal, right? It feels like we're animals.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
that's usually talking about like our base desires, or I have
Hmm.
this, like, I need to
Right.
have sex and I need to
Hmm.
eat, and
Right.
like,
Yeah.
that's my animal part. But then
Yeah.
I'm these other parts too.
Right. Yeah.
But I think you're saying more, our whole self, our whole experience is an organism,
Hmm.
and probably embedded with an environment, like it's an organism that responds. And like, could you speak to how you see the human through an organismic lens, and
Hmm.
maybe why that has value even to see
Yeah.
ourselves that way? I
Hmm.
remember in a training
Yeah.
with you, what another
Hmm.
kind of co-trainer
Hmm.
said, like, oh, I've been thinking about myself as an organism, and it's just
Uh-huh.
so much easier to be me when I
Uh-huh.
think about myself as an organism. It's less
Uh-huh.
complicated.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was very much Reich's, position. And I think also, going back to early Gestalt. I mean, in the book Gestalt Therapy by Paul Pearls, Hefliner, and Goodman, very much they speak about organism and the organismic stance,
Mm-hmm.
that we are essentially biological creatures, no really different than any other biological creature, just that we've evolved, that biology we've evolved to have certain kind of capacities and organization where we express certain basic movements and functions in their own particular way, in a different way, but we share far more in commonality than we do in differences. So, when they say, we have so much share, what 97% of our DNA is shared with a worm. I
Mm.
mean, you know,
Yeah.
and we're not that much different than worms, or we're not that much different than amoebas. Basically, we go and we explore the world, we go to eat, we take in, we contract against the environment that's threatening, we expand into the environment that's pleasurable, we sense, we have senses, we become conditioned. We, in a sense, now or we don't know if amoebas make meaning of things, but we make meaning of these basic physiological patterns and movements. So we're essentially organisms that are totally embedded in everything else that's alive.
Mm.
If we would really recognize that, we wouldn't be at war with nature.
Yeah.
We wouldn't try to dominate nature. In fact, we would really respect how we're embedded as just part of nature. And as we mess up one thing, we're going to mess up another because we're all integrated in that particular way. But we don't recognize that, or some of us don't, or Western society
It
hasn't.
seems like our culture
Our
isn't
culture
recognizing it
is
based
not
on
recognizing that.
based
And
on what the
because
world looks like.
that's right. If we would recognize that, there wouldn't be such separation between people,
Mm, hmm. Yeah,
because again,
even
there's
politically, as
even
we're living
politically,
living right now, where it's
yes,
like
there
two
wouldn't
different
be,
organisms,
right,
this
right,
party and that party.
right, or the whole concept of race and
Yeah,
all these prejudices and all this othering that
Yeah.
goes on. If we really recognize that and could feel it, I don't mean just recognize it intellectually, but actually feel the commonality of that, I think we would be transformed.
Yeah.
Again, it would be, having this contact with others and contact with this just basic pulsating life energy. So we're organisms. And I think for me, that does simplify things.
Yeah.
We make things complicated as human beings. And Reich would say that, some things are intricate, but we complicate things as part of armoring.
Mm-hmm.
And some things are fairly simple.
Yeah. So like in the simple notion of us being organisms,
Yeah.
what are qualities of that simplicity, even as we move through life? Like, what do you think are sort of these basic ways
Well,
of attuning to ourselves as
yeah,
organisms?
well, I mean, the emotions are simple.
Mm-hmm.
The basic emotions, and then they're how they become then, kind of, I guess, transformed or expressed or whatever. So a simple, when we're interested in something and we can feel our interest, we move toward it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we're tired, we retreat. Okay. When we feel a yearning, we reach. When we feel, as you said earlier, the way you described it in terms, when we feel disgusted and we know there's something wrong, we move away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When we feel frightened, we stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we feel we're under threat, we get angry and put up a barrier. We harden. Okay, basic kind of things. And then when the environment changes, we let go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we are in sync with what happens in the environment. What happens with armor is that we get stuck. We
Mm-hmm.
get stuck in repetitive patterns. We're stuck in an emotional scent. We remain armored, so we remain angry, or we remain frightened, or we remain sad as a defense against the full flow of emotions, because emotions and feelings are always in movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even as we talk, you know, there's change in how our voices are, and we stop and we pull back. I get excited about something, you get excited, you
Mm-hmm.
move toward, and then you move away. There is this flow and change and fluidity of emotions.
Mm.
If we could honor that organismic sense in ourselves, that's we just be engaged in life in that particular way. But when we can't, then we're cut off, and then
Yeah, I hear you saying in a way there, like if you can be with this simple or this basic quality of an
yes,
organism that has an intelligence in the way that it moves through life,
it does. It has an
that
intelligence.
that we can more like dynamically flow with the changing quality of experience. So it's
Yes.
always moving and
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
And if you're
Hmm.
not armored, you're not kind of fighting against that movement.
Exactly. Yeah. You say things far better than I do. I really like the way
Well,
you
you
pull it together.
you trained me.
Okay. Okay.
When you're talking about this, like one thing I'm thinking about is just myself
Yeah.
and other humans, that it seems like we turn our organisms against ourselves.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
we're like fighting our organismic nature.
Yeah.
And then almost like even people that maybe get into change or self-help or like
Hmm.
modern kind of life hacking, that we're
Yeah.
like
Huh.
we're trying to change from like one armor to another armor. Like I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't like this armor that eats food at
Hmm.
night and watches Netflix. I want the armor that like wakes up in the morning and like
Hmm.
is productive,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
makes more money. So I'm gonna make these habits to get me
Yeah.
this new armor.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is just what's
Yeah.
coming up for me.
That's true. That is so true.
Can
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
speak to this? Like, why does our organism almost turn on itself? And we like feel it, right? Like our negative
Yeah.
thoughts
Right.
towards ourselves, our
Yeah.
slapping our wrist, our
Yeah.
shame right after we
Yeah.
talk. Like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Why'd I do that?
Well, I think we've introjected, we've taken in the way the environment turned on us.
Hmm.
The message was, don't trust. The
Yeah.
message was, this feeling state, this energetic state, this movement is wrong.
Yeah.
This is a threat. So
This
we,
sort of basic organismic process is not
yes,
okay.
it's not okay. It's
Yeah.
not okay. So then we take that in, and then it's a threat. And so
Mm.
if it's a threat, we've got to turn on it.
Yeah.
Okay? You know,
And it
so
seems like we got
we,
a lot of cool strategies for doing that, for turning on.
yes, we do. We have a
We're like
lot of
very
cool stuff.
clever in how to make ourselves suffer for these like very basic organismic processes.
Right.
Not
Well,
giving
we are very clever organisms.
a-
Yeah. I mean, a basic organism has very only a few degrees of movement. We have many degrees of movement, and we're very clever, and we can use that cleverness, as you say, to make ourselves suffer,
Yeah.
to keep ourselves, in line.
So what would you say, just like, for the somebody that wants to return to this like trust in their organism,
Yeah.
but they've been clever for a long time and like turning the organism against themselves. Like what do you think are some basic things that people can do to sort of almost reclaim the naturalness of their body, or I don't know what you want to call it, but just
Yeah.
being with experience more fully?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, one of the things now versus when I first got into this field is that so many more things are available. The whole idea of looking towards one organism, kind of coming to one's body, not in just in terms of I'm going to make it a certain way, but I'm going to make contact with it, or I'm going to ease it. I'm going to recognize what stress does to it. I'm going to try breathe into it. All of those things is so much more available. I
Mm.
mean, yoga, which is so prevalent now and has so many benefits, was just, I mean, there was one show on OP that wasn't OP, just like
Yeah, yeah.
public TV, one
Mhm.
person. I mean, it was so on the fringe. All of this was on the fringe. It's so much more in the zeitgeist. It's so much more here right now. And I think there are so many ways that we can learn about how to breathe, how to relax, how to recognize when we are, turning against ourselves.
Mm.
So,
So for you, it's a basic sort of catching it, like seeing the process of turning against
yeah,
ourselves and relaxing and maybe having curiosity
yeah,
and
and then seeing where we've been indoctrinated by ideas in our environment. You
thank you
know,
for bringing that
yes,
strong
yeah,
word in
that's
there. I
strong
love
word.
that.
That's right.
That we've
You
been
know,
indoctrinated to like hold our bodies and our emotions in a certain way to
Yes, that's right. That's right. We're not supposed to feel alive. We're not supposed to feel sexual. We're not supposed to love. We're not supposed to hate. We're not
yeah.
supposed to
What the
run.
fuck is left? What can we actually feel or do?
That's right. Well, that's right. So we can't. The more we do that, the less we can feel and do. And then we become more disembodied and more separate from what it is to be an organism, what it is to have our emotion. We get stuck in one emotion and not another emotion. So to be able to see those kind of indoctrinations and how we are getting those messages so much all the time, and how, some messages are messages that align ourselves to ourselves, and some messages are ones to separate ourselves.
Yeah, so you think there's like maybe a type of inventory that we almost could do to become aware of these subtle messaging that
Yeah,
we
but
receive very early.
right, but it's hard because we're living in it.
Hmm.
When we're embedded in something, it's hard to see it from the outside.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
hence the need for maybe like therapists or healers and stuff.
yeah. Therapists, healers, meditation, those things that take us into another biophysical state, another relational state,
Hmm.
and therefore allow us to step out and begin to see ourselves and feel ourselves in a different way. And once we have those different experiences, then we have these anchor points. Then we can say, wait a minute, that's not true because I felt it here.
Yeah.
It's different. But it's in therapy, and I guess it's through the relationship, it's learning and helping somebody else guide us. And by guide us, my sense of guiding is not so much like I'm going to show you from the outside, but I'm going to help what's inside emerge.
Mm.
And as it emerges, then you recognize other possibilities. And then you see where the messages are false or I've been indoctrinated.
Have you ever seen anyone like kind of get in contact with what's under the surface? It starts emerging and them being disappointed in it or not liking it or it being a bad thing for them? Because it seems so often we
Mhm.
like it, it feels threatening to engage
Yeah,
these sort of
right.
lost parts.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
does and like I feel like a younger therapist. I tell people like it hasn't gone bad yet, but I don't know.
But help me that when you say it hasn't gone bad, what do you mean?
That's a good question. Thank you. Like it just can feel threatening on a level to re-engage. And what I
Yes.
see for myself and most people being like half baked on whatever this journey is,
Yeah.
that it's more alive and it feels so much better.
Yeah.
And but from the other side, right, like maybe if somebody hasn't is curious or like I want to try this out, I want to re-engage, I want to connect and
Mm-hmm.
reclaim my body and
Mm-hmm.
my emotions,
Yeah.
but it feels really scary and
Yes.
almost
Yeah.
like wanting some reassuring words for those folks, like,
Yeah.
oh,
Right.
like could you, like if you were given a pitch like this is why you should do this, like what
Yeah.
would you say to someone that's sort of like should I reconnect, like I don't know, this
Yeah.
feels like a lot of
Well,
work, I feel
right.
scary, I don't know what's
I
there, there's going
what
to be
I would
monsters in the closet.
what I would say is that's all true. You know, I would say
Oh,
that's all true, and I would never give a pitch.
never a pitch.
Never a pitch.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that would put me as kind of assuming that I know what's best
Like
or
you
I
would
know
be a
there's a
new
right way.
indoctrinator yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now you be the good patient or the person that does the another way that they're supposed to live.
And within that though, you do a work that helps
Hmm.
people contact in a way, because I imagine you find it beneficial and helpful
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, a person comes to me because, you know, they have some difficulties. And I engage them in a way that I believe will help them at some point not have those difficulties.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah, it's very simple. Just help people with the difficulties they have.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Within Reich's work, it seems like orgone and like his word for energy, right?
Yes,
And it was for
orgone.
him. It was organismic. No, not
Yeah, organismic.
orgiastic. That was the word I was
Okay,
looking.
orgastic.
Orgastic.
Well,
Yeah,
for him, there was a life energy.
life
It
energy.
was a life energy. He called it orgone energy
Yeah.
because it was organic.
Mm-hmm.
From it was in the organism. Okay. It was a sexual energy. He didn't differentiate. He felt all life was sexual. I mean, what
Like
propagates
how else
life?
did we get here?
How else did we get here? So, or, that, and, so this process of living is a sexual process. May not be a genital process, but it's
Mhm.
a sexual process. And, and, and this life energy is all around us. And he felt that the emotions and the feelings were essentially our internal experience of energy moving through us in certain ways,
Mm.
and
Like
and
almost emotions are one of the vehicles through which this energy moves, or one of the prisms that sort of fractals out the energy. So you,
exactly. I think so. I think that's a better way. It's one of the prisms.
yeah.
I mean, as energy moves us in a certain way, we experience that way into as an emotion, then it became encoded in us, those particular, because we know we have specific emotion centers, kind of like emotional patterns in different areas of the brain that, if triggered, will bring up certain feeling
Oh,
states and
like you can put
different,
an electrode in the brain,
yeah, or
send some elect-
chemo,
and then I'm gonna get angry or
yeah,
something.
right, or chemicals in
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
so all of these basic things become kind of encoded in ourselves, but they're all basic expressions of how energy moves in the world and moves as an energy within an organism. Reich also felt that that energy moves in the whole total atmosphere. So, like chi, prana,
Yeah,
you
like we're
know,
sort of swimming in this energy
we are
all around.
swimming in the energy.
Yeah,
And in some ways, the energy connects us all, and and in a sense, we're all connected.
yeah. But almost the armoring that blocks the energy
It stops the movement of the energy.
in another, on maybe on some level, disconnects us from the energy around us, and we lose some
Yes,
sense of participating in a
yes, we
sort
lose
of
the,
vibrant field of
yes,
aliveness
that's right.
almost.
Sure, sure, right,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
I mean, if you're a leaf and there's a wind, to really be feeling and participating in the wind, you've got to be able to move. But
yeah.
if you're rigid, you can't really move with it. So we're cut off from the environment in that particular way. Or if that leaf, doesn't have enough substance to it that it just gets blown away,
Mm-hmm.
it can't really vibrate in a certain particular way. So, yes, either we don't have enough solidity or we have too much solidity.
Mm.
Either we're not rigid enough or too rigid enough. You
Yeah, yeah,
know,
because we often, when we think of armoring, we think of it in the
in the
rigid,
rigid,
yeah,
right?
where we're repressed or we're cut
Yeah,
off. But
mhm.
there's also having too porous, too open, too
That's
much
right.
energy flowing that it's dysregulating almost for the
Right.
person.
Yeah, yeah. That we really can't contain the energy or feel the energy in the kind of state or the emotion. So we run from it,
Uh,
or
yeah,
we disassociate from it, or separate ourselves from it,
or throw it to someone else.
or throw it to, why not? Why
you,
not?
you take this one, please.
Why not? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But there is this energy. So, and that's why Reich eventually called his work orgone therapy. He didn't call it Reichian therapy, he called it orgone therapy because he believed in the essence, as you're working to undo the character and biophysical armor, what you're doing is you're freeing up the organism, freeing up the person to fully allow the energy to naturally move and the organism to naturally, in that movement, pulsate,
Mm.
expand and contract into the world. And you know that's what happens in therapy. Yeah.
And for you or for Reich, like, is that energy like a neutral quality that just sort of is and it moves through us, or does it have, because it sounds like there's a trust in it, like you open up to this
Yeah.
energy and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a good, I don't know if good thing is the right word, but like
Well,
more
well,
alive or
yeah.
more enriching maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe not. You open up to that energy and you feel the pain of the world. You
Yeah,
know, necessarily as you unarmor, that doesn't mean you're going to feel good.
yeah,
We armor to protect ourselves from negative feelings, from painful feelings. But the world offers us painful feelings
it's all around
as
us.
it's all around us. So as you become more in touch with your emotions, you can be and probably will be in touch with the pain of the
Yeah,
world,
yeah,
the shock of the world, the
yeah,
horror in the world. So not necessarily you're going to feel better.
yeah,
And Reich
you,
was very clear about that.
yeah. Uh, so there's in a way when we open up, we're opening up to life.
To life,
Yeah.
right? Opening up to life, opening up to nature, opening up to,
Yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to get at, I don't think I'm quite touching it very
yeah.
well, is like Reich seems very life affirming.
Yes, yeah,
Like they're like, and for me, there's an element of trust or something there.
yeah,
Like,
right.
and I wonder if you just speak to that quality, that life affirming, or what, that stance. It seems almost to kind of,
Yeah, well, I mean, if life in nature,
yeah,
okay, okay,
yeah,
you know, we are parts of nature. So what we're doing is connecting to nature and to parts of it. So that's life affirming because we are life. All we are is life. So
mm-hmm,
that affirms it. But if you mean life affirming, is that's going to necessarily lead to always feeling good are always pleasant and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No,
Like
because
this
there's a
isn't
lot.
another drug that you can take.
It's not another drug that you can take, because we see in nature that nature, from the human perspective, is cruel. You
Hmm.
know, a hurricane comes and wipes things out. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there's pain in nature. Okay. And but we're part of nature. So, so maybe the best in life, to live life, is to embrace and be part of all of it.
Yeah.
And both both sides of it, the yin and the yang, right?
Hmm.
Which flows into one another. How can you have one without the other? In Gestalt, there's the figure ground,
Yeah.
you know, there's the background and the foreground. You can't have one without the other. So it all flows together.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying in this sort of, as I'm hearing it, that really, in one way, it's about returning to our natural selves, like being a part of
Mm-hmm.
nature,
Yeah.
and that there's some value there
Mm-hmm.
in reconnecting or reclaiming ourselves as
Mm-hmm.
inherently embedded and a part of
Mm-hmm.
nature,
Yeah.
and that through that we might maybe get something out of it, but it might have a cost too, like it
Yeah.
being open and hurt, like the pain of the world, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or when we connect with our needs, right, like having to hurt others to meet our needs, or whether that's
Yeah.
like ending a relationship because you're become clear that it's not working,
That's
or
right. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. That's right. And feeling it, and
and feel,
feeling it not only for ourselves, but feeling it for the other person.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
I guess, a term that's used a lot now, was used less, was vulnerability. I'm making myself vulnerable,
yeah,
and that's often, I think, meant is that we're feeling certain states that we didn't want to feel, you
yeah,
know, and oftentimes it's around hurt or hurts of the world. I'm vulnerable to it,
yeah,
but, that's, you know, that's softening into really what life is. Yeah.
yeah, like we're becoming vulnerable to nature or to
Yeah.
life
Right. Yeah.
when we open up to the fullness of the
Yeah.
human experience.
Yeah, right. And in that sense, we become more like children, going back, kind
Yeah,
of, coming back to that circle. Young children, you
yeah,
know, you see them responding fluidly
mm, yeah,
and being vulnerable to joy, to sorrow, to hurt, to anger,
yeah,
to fear, and moving from one state to another.
yeah, yeah. That's
Uh,
one thing I'm really connecting as we talk, this sort of fluidity and flow.
yes.
That like being in touch with the human organismic natural experience, whatever
Hmm.
we call it, is this dynamic flowing experience.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's like sort of like getting on board for the ride more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well, that's what it is. It's getting on board for the ride,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a study I really love. I wish I had more of the facts down, but they got a bunch of Tibetan Buddhists in a room,
Uh-huh.
and they had a screen in front of them, right, where they showed them random images, but they weren't
Yeah,
so random. They were like pictures of a baby playing with a balloon,
yeah,
and then the other one would be like a hole in the ground, but when you look in the hole, there's dead bodies there.
yeah,
And they would kind of flip through these different emotional
yeah,
landscapes.
yes,
And what they found, they were shocked by, was that these kind of advanced super
yeah,
meditators in
yeah,
Tibet, right? They're not in Nepal now, but they they like felt the emotion twice as strong almost as
yeah.
the average person, but it
Hmm.
dropped but down so much quicker.
Yes,
Like it was like they felt it and then it was done.
yes,
But the
yeah,
control group that they studied, just the average humans, it like slowly ramped up and then kind of got stuck for a
yeah,
while and slowly faded
yeah,
down.
right,
And
yeah,
I kind of like what you're saying that like we don't get to bypass these negative feelings or the
yeah,
difficult feelings.
yeah,
It's actually
uh-huh.
like feeling them more fully almost, or like
Yeah,
being more fully in them.
yeah,
But then in that, maybe we don't kind of get as stuck with them, that they can come and go more freely.
yeah,
Is that, would
yeah.
that be
Well,
safe?
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I hear the question in the statement there. It's like I mean, the way I interpret that,
Yeah,
because I was
please
wondering, well, how
interpret
do you
what.
interpret that? How do you interpret it? Is that they had trained themselves to really be in contact in their whole being
Mm-hmm.
with what was in front of them.
Yeah.
And so their being reacted. They felt it. But then as that faded, as that went away, then what was new, they could be in contact with again.
Yeah.
So their organism was like a tuning fork. You know, when C came, it resonated.
Mm.
But then as another note came, it resonated something different. And it
Yeah.
wasn't holding on. It wasn't in the memory. I still got to resonate like this.
Yeah.
Or I
No, the
haven't.
last image was bad. I gotta feel bad about that
That's right.
one.
That's right. And it's now wasn't only a mental thing. It's like the organism still was holding on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yes, that's kind of like it is. And that's how it is much more with children. When you see a child, they do something and then they're frightened and then they go to their parent, their attachment
They seek
figure.
comfort
They
quickly.
seek comfort. And once they're comforted, they're back out again. And how could that be? You were just crying so deeply. You were just so crying. It was so much in pain. And now you're jumping up and down and yelling and happy. How did
Yeah.
that happen? Because there was the fluidity there, and they could return back to other experience. But when we're armored, when we're cut off, we get locked. In Gestalt, there is a term, a fixed Gestalt, where we get locked in kind of like a way in which we've organized something, and we can't let go of that to be with what's new,
Yeah.
with what emerges that's new. And so we can't, as these Tibetan monks did, that we can't just kind of like fully be with and then let go. And in a sense, to me, another interpretation is that's what letting go is.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine that at those moments, they weren't telling themselves, I need to let go of
I
this
should
thing.
really let go of this
I
right
should really
now.
let go. They
That's
weren't
my
like,
training.
that's right.
I'm a meditator. I let
Right.
go of things.
That's right. I'm practicing letting go. Is that their organism now let go?
Yes. Yeah, that we like sometimes top down tell ourselves like let go, surrender, accept,
Yes. Right.
but
Yeah.
maybe it's more in the visceral, fully
Yeah. Right.
embodying it that it lets go.
Yeah. Right. And sometimes that's frustrating. That's frustrating to clients. I'm told I should let go, but I don't know how to let go. What's wrong with me? Why can't I let go? And what does it even mean to let go? And and it's like, yeah, what does it mean? And
Yeah, it's like, well,
you
what do
know,
you want to let go? And then let's
that's
talk about
right.
that.
And I can't. Oh,
Yeah.
why don't you let go? Just
Now I
let.
feel bad.
Right. Yeah, because now I feel guilty that I can't do it. I'm supposed to do it. And
Yeah. Do you still like me? Am I a good client?
that's right, really. Really. And
Yeah.
so that also speaks to, a process. You started out saying that, you see me as a person who does therapy well, or,
Yeah.
however, it's like one of the things that I've learned or seems true to me is that the imposition upon others of this is the way you're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
is harmful.
Yes.
Even if in the long run, it would be better if that person was doing that, we think.
Yeah, like if you
But
were more fluid, you'd probably be happier. But that
right,
imposition itself,
hey, that's right.
yeah.
That's right. It's that imposition. So we give messages. And I think, therapists fall into this,
Oh,
what are they doing? They're doing psychoeducation or something like that. We're telling you, but that's not how we discover ourselves. That's not how we become fluid.
mm. Yeah,
You know,
for you, it's bringing someone in contact with themselves, and these
exactly. Yeah,
qualities emerge from that.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So if a person says, I don't know what it means to let go, they're not going to hear from me, well, you should let go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Why haven't you let go yet? We've done this for 10 sessions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah.
So I want to shift
Yeah.
back, and
Yeah.
maybe this will
Sure.
be one of the last sort of chunkier things
Okay.
we talk
Sure.
about. But earlier, when you were talking about Reich, these sort of maybe two threads of the way that we armor
Hmm.
and kind of get stuck, as we've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
talking about.
Hmm.
But then civilization or culture,
Hmm.
like in culture as part of the indoctrinator.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I'm curious from maybe a little bit of a different angle too. That like let's say we do free ourselves a bit, or we're more in
Yes.
contact,
Hmm.
we seem to still be in a rigid culture in ways.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
hard to know how much of that is our perception, right? That we've been
Hmm.
conditioned to
Right.
think a culture is a certain way,
Right.
and how much is actually like inherent to the culture, if
Hmm.
there is such a thing.
Hmm.
But like, what, like, how does someone that, you know, starts to open up, like, contend with maybe the character of the culture?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is enough to kind of get you talking,
No,
but that's
sure.
all I
Well,
want.
I think that's really important, and it kind of goes back to, the question or this, you know, there's something inherently maybe negative or painful about undoing armoring.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we do it to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we undo it, we notice that some of the things, some of the aspects of culture that we're fitting in really doesn't fit. It doesn't really resonate with us, and so that makes things more distressing.
Mm-hmm.
Before it wasn't distressing because we were just part of it. Or it
Yeah, we
was
got.
distressing, but it came out in symptoms. It came out in depression or unhappiness or anxiety or whatever. That brings a person into therapy, you know. But as they become closer to themselves, now, okay, oh, I'm no longer depressed in that particular way. But now I recognize that this doesn't fit right. This doesn't feel right. This is antithetical to my being.
Hmm.
Now I'm depressed in a different way. Or now I'm confronted with a problem in a different way. What do I do? You mentioned earlier, well, sometimes people have to leave, relationships or leave jobs or whatever. I've got to change my environment, but that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That can cause stress and distress to others, to oneself. So, you know, so sometimes people kind of say, wait a minute, I just want to shut this down and go back. Ignorance, if we
Is
call ignorance, is bliss in a sense.
you go back to thinking this was maybe my
Yeah,
fault, or
right,
like I'm depressed. I am depressed, not I'm
right.
participating in a
That's right.
culture that generates
That's
depression.
right. That's right. You know, but
Mm.
when we start seeing what it is, in the culture, then we also we can feel powerless. The culture is big. You
And this
know,
was like very parallel for Reich too, right? He became very involved in culture at one point.
at one point.
Maybe he felt that too, and I didn't want to
Yes,
move.
that's right. Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, he began his work between World War One and World War Two,
Yeah.
and he saw very clearly the rise of Nazism, the change of more of a life socialism to communism,
Mm-hmm.
and he saw, how these forces of culture and led to people embracing these totalitarian ideas, which were very much anti-life. He was an advocate early on of sexual freedom and free contraceptions and against the laws against homosexuality and things, all that were happening in the 30s in a very progressive Germany. You know, but simultaneously, there were these counter forces, the stronger forces of repression and fascism and all of that. And he saw how that became manifested and was manifested in families and whatever, and what it was, what it did. And
Yeah.
so, you know, he was very political at first, but then he began to really begin to feel that unless we change ourselves in a way, we're not going to be able to really resonate and see what is happening in the environment, in our cultures. We're too embedded in those
Oh,
particular
I
things.
like that perspective. Almost through the changing of ourselves, we can more clearly see the culture we're embedded in,
Yeah, we will
and like
really
know
see.
what maybe could change or needs to
That's
change.
right. And see and feel how harmful it is.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, when I think about, what we talk about in terms of what happened to the children at the Mexican border and the way children were put into the way they say cages or places, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you have a feeling for children and really have a feeling that we're all organisms and really how can you allow that? How can you rationalize that? in any
Mhm.
way, shape, or form. But once you cut yourself off from that, then you can rationalize it. Oh, we're keeping these horrible people out of the country. Oh, they were breaking the law, all these things. But to do that, we've got to separate ourselves from the pain.
Mm.
To do that, but when we don't, then we really see about the kind of cultural environment of that particular, that is being expressed in those particular laws, you
Yeah.
know, as we begin to see, in terms of, and I think that's what's amazing right now in terms of what's come out in this country and, in other parts of the country, in terms of how we're seeing how racism and sexism and all of that, how it's permeated our culture in ways that we've been blind to.
Hmm.
But
Yes.
as we begin to see that and feel that, it's like, shit, man, this is what we've been living in.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a reckoning.
A reckoning. And then we've got to make some change. And then,
Yeah.
but that's not easy. That's not easy to do.
So I almost hear from you like that this reclaiming of the organismic body
Hmm.
is a radical endeavor that has the possibility to change culture.
Yes.
Not in like a static, here's how we should change culture, but if we're individually reconnecting our bodies, we're all going to move differently within culture.
It's, again, beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not going to come from some ideation,
Yeah. Like,
you
oh,
know.
it should be like this, or we
That's
should do
right.
this, or
That's
it
right.
should look
Because
like
the
this.
equation says X, Y, and Z. But
Hmm.
because we feel it, we know it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is something I think about a lot in like very different language. Like I think about us as being part of like that there's a song, there's like the song of the earth,
Hmm.
and we're all a part of that song. We have our own
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
note to play or
Yeah.
whatever, like
Yes.
melody in the song.
Hmm.
And as we get cut off from ourselves, we're cut off from our song.
Yeah.
And that when we connect to our song, and that the earth needs all of our songs in
Yeah.
order to function, in
Yeah.
order to be like for the
Yeah.
harmonics to come
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, I'm like interpreting what you're saying as like reclaiming our song. And then as we do that,
Hmm.
like the world or culture might change in ways that we can't plan or expect,
Yeah.
because we're just a small little piece of it. But if we're all doing it and then it comes together,
Yeah.
like it might look a little different. That's my
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
hopefulness there, at
Yeah.
least.
Well, I love that. I think this, it's so true with what you're saying, and it also, like, so much. So I often think about the human organism, or all organisms, we're musical instruments,
Yeah, and
you
like
know,
science is saying that now, right?
and that's
Almost the
what science.
polyvagal nerve, right, being
Yes.
a tone, and we're toning our
Yeah,
body.
sure, sure. But even prior to the polyvagal nerve,
Yeah,
just organisms, before they had an autonomic nervous system, we vibrate,
yeah,
and so we live in vibration. Energy is vibration, you
yeah,
know, and energy and it's a song. So we are all songs. I love that, what you're
yeah.
saying. And we're connected as a greater song,
Mm-hmm.
a greater pulsation,
Yeah. And
you
almost
know?
if you want to be a song,
Yeah.
like if you want to vibrate right now, at least,
Hmm.
it might hurt a little bit because you're going to hit some
Oh, yeah.
harmonics that don't feel so good in your
Oh,
body.
yeah, sure. Well, it will hurt.
Yeah. So you can cut off and then you
Yeah,
don't get to play your instrument.
that's right.
But if
That's
you want
right.
to be a player, like you're going to
Yeah.
open up to some
Well,
disharmonics
right.
these days.
Well, you not only don't get to play your instrument, but you get caught off. You're cut off from the totality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's this piece that's hard for, like, I want to be able to talk about as we're together. And
Yeah.
it's feels so vital.
Yeah.
This quality, like as we connect to ourselves, our orgone, our life energy,
Hmm.
we then are connected to life all around us. And like
Yeah.
loneliness and all these things we suffer from might be different if
Hmm.
we felt ourselves sort of embodied as participating in a living organism, right? This
That's
large
right.
organism of life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be different. It could
Yeah.
not otherwise but be different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And like what that world would look like if we're part of this thing, and it's a part
Yes.
of us, and
Yeah.
then each one of
Right.
us we know is a part of it, and like,
Yeah. What it would look like, what it would feel like.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
How would we experience both our own individuality and our own connectedness, both
yeah,
of which is true?
yeah, yeah. You're making me think of this moment I had maybe in the fall, I took some psilocybin mushrooms on a mountain by
Mm-hmm.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt the presence of like a. He felt like he was from the land, like someone from the land.
Yeah.
I didn't see him or anything. I just kind of
Yeah.
felt him there,
Yeah.
and he just said like one line to me was, "We were a joyous people."
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
it really made me reflect on my own ideas of change and like
Mm-hmm.
returning to nature, as we're talking
Yes.
about, which are
Yeah.
very like central to who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it can get dark in my head a little bit. Like
Yeah.
I got to do this thing because the world's fucked, and it's
Yeah.
like and then this other view, like, oh, it's joyous, like vibrating in
Right.
this joyous
That's
sort
right.
of participatory field. And
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, these just come through as you talk to me. And I don't really know how to. I'm grasping at how to say
No,
it, but
no, but you're in sync with it. I mean, embedded in that is joy.
yeah.
I mean, right comes from Freud, and Freud had the pleasure principle,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Yeah.
we're moved by the pleasure principle. Joy is there. Young children, and again, going back to children, why I loved working with children, there's all the pain and stuff, but there is the joy. Children more are willing to show joy.
Yeah.
And if they're free, joy is probably in pleasure more, greater percentage
Yeah. Yeah.
of their existence.
Yeah. And never very far away.
And never far away. Beautifully. It's never far away. And again, going back to what we were saying, that it's not like we've left the child behind. It's
Yeah.
still on us. Joy for us is potentially never far away.
Yeah. Oh, that feels like a beautiful place to end.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
joy is never far away.
Never far away.
Yeah. Are there any last words or anything you just want to
No,
say as
no,
we're here?
no. Well, I really appreciated. I
Yeah.
appreciated our conversation.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you
Yeah, well,
for
thank you,
stepping into
and
this
vice versa.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I say the way you listened and reflect and hear and process just me more, brought some of what I think and feel out in a way that feels really good.
Yeah, even I really appreciated when I was leaning towards the good
Yeah,
of reconnecting, and you're like,
yeah.
whoa, 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 it's not all good. And I'm like, oh yeah, 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 that's true. Thank you.
Mhm. Yes, but then you brought it back to the joy. So
Yeah, and like I think what I'm trying to say too is like when we're cut off, our joys might be these small joys, right?
yes, of course.
Like I get to watch TV at the end of the day or whatever. Like I'm gonna go on a
Exactly.
sauna tonight. I'm really
Yeah,
excited about that.
right. Yeah.
But maybe there's this other joy that's just like part of being alive.
There is not only maybe, I believe it.
Yeah, and then like when we open ourselves up, we become part of that field of joy.
That's right.
That
Yeah.
maybe we're joyous when we're sorrow, we're joyous
Yeah.
when we hurt, like because we're alive.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that part.
For me, it's this piece of like you feel alive, and there's something there.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
that's for
don't, you don't, you
maybe
don't
that's for
find, yeah, yeah,
that's for
you,
another conversation.
and we get to
Then.
have
Yeah.
difference.
That's yes, yes. And that is so important.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
That we get to have difference.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.